to Fans of the Forge, where we are recapping Master of Arms Season 1, Episode 5, the Grenade Launcher.
Oh, yeah. Grenade Launcher.
Gonna be a pretty good one. So, our contestants this week, Dan Rossiter. He's a professional custom gun maker, 15 years experience, does restoration and stock maker of Edwardian-era guns. Was a professional rifle shooter for Duquesne University.
So the guy knows his guns.
All right. Then we have Tim Frills.
Tim
Friz. Police officer and bomb technician, firearms maker and inventor. Has been making guns for 7 years. Specialization in flintlock rifles. And we have Ed Perry, who sells custom long rifles, 20 years experience, over 250 flintlock firearms. So, pretty good. Let's see what they got to make this week. In our quick draw challenge, they are given 3 hours to make a flintlock mechanism.
Okay.
So just the mechanism.
What did you think about that?
I thought it was an interesting idea. Up until now, they've made, these weapons where they needed to have that already made because of the detail involved, and you can't do both.
Except
There's
for the
not
ball
enough time.
and chain flail.
Well, they didn't need an ignition system for that.
Oh, because it was Joan of Arc's sword after that. Anyway,
Yeah.
right. So, yeah, you're right.
There's only been one other time where they've had to make a mechanism, and then I question how much do they have to make for
Right.
that. So it seems like, and we'll go into it, flintlock was developed in the 17th century. Flintlock mechanism became the basis of most firearms at the time. Parameters for this, they're given all the necessary pieces, which need to be filed and assembled, fitted and tapped to the thousandth of an inch. Will not be provided with flint for testing. So they have to kind of know what they're doing, and they can't test it and make adjustments. So It's really going to test their knowledge and skills to make this mechanism. So with Dan, he begins by trying to figure out how the pieces are going to fit together. Smokes a piece to be able to see how it's meeting with another piece. So he has this little oil lamp, lights it, gets soot on it, and then fits the pieces together to see where they're rubbing so he can make adjustments, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a neat method for that.
And then he starts with the hammer and bridle. He's guessing where the mainspring goes, hopes he guesses it right.
That's not something you want to hear when somebody's making a firearm.
No.
I hope I'm guessing the right spot.
And at one point he broke the head off a screw. Not a problem for how the frizzen works, but he needs to secure it somehow.
How did he end up securing it? Do you remember?
No, I don't.
I don't
I'm
know.
sorry.
Moving on to Tim, he noticed that the frizzen is not hardened, so he starts prepping the frizzen for a heat treat. He has an issue with the drill bit kind of being wobbly, and ends with a curved hole for the mainspring, which causes him some stress. In the last half hour, he realizes he needs to tap and thread the jaw piece, which what does that hold the flint in place?
The top part of it.
Yeah, so that's what the flint attaches to. And down to the last second, he didn't finish. He had three threads left to go.
Yeah, he was using the tapping system that just
it was the ratcheting, and
was it ratcheting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that one ratchets, and he's like, it's just not working, it's not going, and I don't know what happened there.
It takes time to do that. I've had to do that before in the past. Not with a ratcheting one, just with a regular one.
Yeah.
And it's such a pain in the ass because you go down and you gotta back it off, and then go down and back it off, and so the ratcheting helps with that a little bit. But you can only go so far before it starts to get locked up, and you have to let the stuff out.
Yeah, you got to the shavings out. Yeah. So unfortunately, that's not good news for him. Then we check out Ed. He starts with attaching the bridle to the tumbler. The lock plate is too hard to drill, so he heats it up red hot to drill it, soften the steel, and finishes with enough time to polish and decorate the mechanism.
So only one guy, at least from what they showed, heat treated his frizzen.
Mm-hmm.
He acknowledged it seemed like it wasn't going to be hard enough metal. Not that he still didn't finish, but they didn't show anything for the other two guys about.
Not that they didn't do it either, but I don't know that it had to be done.
Well, that part is the frizzen is the part that strikes
Right. I'm just saying that it has to have been done. I don't know if the guys had to do it, because the other time when they've had a mechanism, that's the guy that peed in the can to quench his, thing.
That's right.
You know, there's a whole thing about that. So he was saying it wasn't hard enough. Then I don't know if they just were given prisons that weren't hardened, or if they were, and he just didn't think so.
Yeah.
How was he going to test it? He didn't have a flint to test with.
Well, you had a file.
Then you can file it.
You could file it to see if it's hard, but I was just wondering. Not that it makes any difference in the end, because he didn't make it. He didn't finish.
Damn. So moving on to testing. Can your flintlock generate a spark? They are given 3 chances to generate a spark and set a barrel on fire. It's really just a lid. I guess they threw some gasoline on there or something like that.
Yeah,
It had this kind of neat mechanism. It would ignite, and then
The powder would fall down onto whatever gas or whatever was on it. It was cool. It was a good way to test it, I thought, and it gives you a good visual aspect that normally just firing off the gun is just going to be like a little spark and bang.
right.
So this gave
To see it like travel down was cool.
Yeah.
Because that's how, gun
It's
is going to go in the barrel.
interesting to see how they did it safely. Like, I was wondering how were they
yeah.
going to shoot this to
Yeah.
try to get it to work.
Here, Zeke, pull the trigger.
Right. So he's got this, poker that he had.
It almost looked like a string, but I guess it was a rod, yeah.
Yeah.
So for Ed, worked on the first try. Big old blaze. For Dan, worked on it first try. Big old blaze. But Tim, he didn't have enough time to finish tapping that top jaw, so the lock was incomplete and it could not be tested. So Tim got the boot.
Tim got boot.
Yep.
Which stunk because he was so close.
It was, it was really close. I mean, I don't know how much more assembly he had to do, but that was the only real thing he needed left.
Yeah.
So then they move on to the Masterbuild challenge, where Dan and Ed are given 4 days to make an 18th century flintlock grenade launcher, also known as a hand mortar.
Grenade launcher! Yeah,
think it's-
hand mortar is a pretty badass name for it,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. So as early as the 17th century, they were used in combat, most often remembered being used by the Navy. Lit grenades were prone to exploding while still inside the barrel. So that was one of those things where it's like, interesting fact. Do we need to worry about the safety of everybody?
I'm really honestly surprised at how those things worked with such a short barrel. I would have expected it. Yeah, I'm just surprised that it can get that much forward momentum out of such a short barrel. I mean, I guess it's a little long because it's got to go down in there, and it was a long piece. But it seemed, compared to a regular rifle or something, it was way shorter.
Yeah.
And it still launched some. So it must somehow, the way that the force of the...
I would say that the grenade charge probably fits snugly in there, as I guess most other muskets would.
Yeah.
And then maybe it's just not, I don't know how big the charge is that's going to propel it out, so it might have been a decent sized charge, but obviously you don't want the grenade to explode.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's not very deep, and it just pops it out of there.
Yeah.
So the parameters are that it need to be 23 to 25 inches long, include flintlock from the Quick Draw Challenge. The barrel must have a design turned into it. We'll need to use wood, metal, and non-ferrous working skills. So they had to do all of these things, the metalworking and the woodworking and everything.
Yep.
So Dan on day 1 was all about getting the foundation stock roughed out and inletting the stock. On day 2, he was working on forging the butt plate, giving it a widow's peak for aesthetics, and also works on the lathe to inlet the barrel. Day 3, he wanted to assemble all the metalwork to the stock and uses a bandsaw to trim down the stock. And then on day 4 is the final assembly. He made a calculation error and put the trigger guard too far forward and needed to fix it. With half an hour left, he realizes that the flintlock is not sparking the way it should, and it needed to be fixed.
With half an hour left. I have a 40-hour build. In the last half hour, he finds out the thing's not working properly.
Yeah, that trigger is really forward, and then he pulled it apart and he's trying to bend it I wonder if he could have just made a new guard.
In that amount of time, maybe. I mean, it's tough.
It's just a piece of metal that, it's got a hoop to it.
Yeah.
Or move it forward. I don't know if I don't think it connected to anything else, but I don't know.
It's hard to tell, really. We're not seeing what else is attached within the gun.
Right.
So Ed starts his 40 hours with the quote, "I love money, but glory is better." And he starts roughing out the stock and then setting the lock and barrel inlets. On day 2, he hopes to have the ferrous components done by the end of the day, and he works on the lathe, where he claims to be an amateur, to inlet the barrel. Day 3, the goal is to get the whole piece into working condition and fixing the barrel to the stock. He drills a hole into the barrel, which he describes as the worst case scenario, but then everything's fine.
He says, oops, there's a hole. Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he broke a tap trying to rectify the problem. And this is where we learn that Ed tends to swear when he's making mistakes.
Oh, my God. I was laughing. It was just like,
No, that wasn't this one.
that wasn't this one?
Oh, maybe it was this
I
one.
thought that was this one. Where
Yeah, the old guy's swearing a
he's
lot.
swearing. It's going,
It's almost like a big long string.
Then
of
it cuts to commercial, and it comes back, and it's beep, beep.
And then on day 4, he's doing the final assembly, incorporates sawdust into the epoxy. The epoxy dried before he could get the screws in all the way. And he vented his frustration. And I thought this was where it was like the lots of
Maybe
swearing,
that
where it was almost fairly continuous beeping.
Maybe you're right.
There were a couple of times where he was swearing a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But he, was working throughout.
Yeah.
He sanded it and stained the wood, reassembled the metal parts, and did some decorative work. He made a Georgian crown and anchor to represent the Navy of King George. So, historical accuracy for you.
Some cool. Well, was it historically accurate?
I don't know. Was
It claimed not to be
No.
later on, which I was like, wait, what?
And a point in his favor, you've seen me do work around the house and do things that are projects
Historically
that I don't-
accurate?
No, not historically accurate stuff, but you've seen me work on projects that are difficult, and if I have issues,
We can't work together.
the F-bombs start flying, and yeah, so I get the swearing. I totally.
Oh,
am.
well, yeah.
You got to. You have to release the frustration.
Oh, man.
Like when I was doing the deck and I couldn't get the goddamn nails out of the top of the board.
Right, but you were working on that one by yourself. When we're doing electrical work and I'm up in the ceiling and you're swearing down below and I can't see what's happening, that's not the same.
Well, someone's got to be swearing.
No, that's not true.
Yeah.
Okay, well then we move on to testing. Nick Irving is back, special ops.
Badass.
Yep, special ops, badass.
Yeah.
You hesitated.
I was stumbling out. It's late, guys.
Take the shot.
So there's 2 tests. First part is they're testing the short range accuracy, firing a ball through the porthole windows. They had this little like boat side setup. And then part 2, the trajectory and distance is being tested by firing the grenade in an arc and hoping for an explosion outside the grenade launcher. So for Ed, test 1, it hit the upper rim of the porthole window, not the center. And Nick says it is not a precision weapon, but it should have been fairly accurate at close range. But for test 2, the trajectory is perfect and everything remains intact. As far as the gun, there was an explosion on the other end.
Right.
For Dan, test 1 hits the center of the window. Nick says, good job. And test 2, it lands over and into the ship and the piece remains intact. Okay, so for judging, for Ed, Zeke says that close quarters was not as good as Dan's, which, was true.
Yep.
Trenton comes back with historically accurate in its close range inaccuracy. Like these weapons weren't meant to do short range. So the fact that it wasn't accurate was historically accurate. There you go, Sean. And Ashley says it's a pristine museum quality piece.
Yes. However, when they talk about the embellishments that he did to it, when they're comparing Dan's to Ed's, and they said, well, Dan's, if we're going to go to it, Well, it wasn't as polished. It didn't look that great as Ed's. Ed did this engraving, and then Ashley's like, well, do you really want to put all this fancy work into it if it just could blow up? Because these things would just blow up from time to time.
True.
And then she actually said Ed's wasn't as historically accurate. Like, they didn't do this stuff.
Oh, they didn't. I thought
supposedly.
they said they did put the crown on it.
That's what I thought too in the beginning, but then she said,
Get Zeke back on the phone.
no.
We have questions.
She said no. They didn't normally do this type of stuff. But they admired that he did it, but then said, well, that's not exactly what they would do typically.
Right.
So for Dan, Zeke said performed exceptionally well in both tests. Ashley said the fit and finish is not necessarily as polished, which is more accurate, that it wouldn't be as polished. And Trenton, the trigger guard and buttstock are sharp. So he had the more maybe not mechanical issues with it, but like.
Well, I'd say it's a mechanical issue if those areas are sharp, especially the buttstock is going up right against your shoulder.
I thought it was a toss-up. I was like,
it seemed like really getting down to nitpicking pieces. But Ed's going home with $10,000 and the title of Master of Arms.
Hey, congratulations,
all right,
Ed.
good job, Ed. Connecticut guy.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
we looked him up at the time.
The
to see
northeast
where,
corner.
Yeah. So many people making weapons in this state. We had no idea.
It's an old state.
That's true.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good reason.
Historically accurate.
Well, that was it. That was a good episode. It was fun to see the grenade launcher.
Made a grenade launcher. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that was
cool.
awesome. So, yeah.
Maybe I'll make one.
Do it. Go for it.
All right.
All right. Keep an eye on your local news for when a local man blows himself up with a homemade grenade launcher.
I could use this beer can. It's about the size of the barrel, right?
Alrighty. Well, that was the episode. We all enjoyed it. It was Season 1, Episode 5 of Master of Arms, the Grenade Launcher. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. Subscribe to the Instagram account. We don't really do Twitter so much. I don't know. Is there anything else?
If you're listening to us on a podcast, please rate us highly on there.
Yes, that would be nice if somebody rated us on the podcast. As of right now, it says not enough ratings. And also, we've been doing some ads lately on some of the podcasts.
Which comes up before the actual,
if you're listening to
it's
this,
the
you've
first thing
already
that
heard
comes
it.
up. Yeah.
And, we're just trying it out. We don't know if it's going to go anywhere. So stick with us as we do this little test with putting some ads at the beginning.
Cool.
And that's it. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And we will catch you whenever the hell Fortune Fire comes back on, I guess. Next week?
Who knows?
Who knows? Bye-bye.
See ya.
Check, check, check. Mic check, mic check.
Check, check.
Oh, yeah. If you check, check.
That's a penalty.
That's a penalty.
In half.
Oh, I broke the apparatus. That's a penalty. So stupid.
It is ridiculous.
Goaltending. 8 million times.
Oh, that's goaltending.
Penalty.
We're going to make it quick. It's going to turn into a pumpkin.